Hello guys, welcome to another episode of this particular video. By name, I am Japhet Okaka Ebosetali, and today under criminal law we'll be looking at classification of offenses under criminal law. So before diving into classification of offenses, you must first of all understand the meaning of an offense, and this then brings us to section 2 of the criminal code, where an offense was defined. So section 2 of the criminal code defined an offense as an act or omission which renders the person doing the act or making the omission liable to punishment under this code. So that is the definition of an offense, meaning an offense can either be an act on one hand, or it can also be an omission. So if you say an offense can be an act in the sense that Mr. A picks a gun, points it at Mr. B, fires the gun, Mr. B dies. Now that's an act. For omission, on the other hand, it means the law imposing a duty on an individual and the individual neglecting, refusing to follow the duty, to adhere to the duty, to fulfill the duty. Now, that's an omission. For an example of an omission can be found in section 199 of the criminal code, which provides for neglect of peace officers to suppress riots. This means that the peace officers have a duty to suppress riots, and in a situation whereby they refuse to suppress a riot, then you can say that's an omission. So an offense can be an act on one hand and can also be an omission on the other hand. So that is the definition of an offense. Now we'll then look at classification of offenses. Classification of offenses. So one thing you must note is that for classification of offenses, offenses are classified into different categories. For example, some offenses are classified according to their procedural process. This is the processes of doing something, the processes of instituting an action. So some offenses are classified according to their procedural process. Also, offenses are classified according to their legal consequences. This means the penalty for committing the offense. So some offenses are classified according to their legal consequence. Now, that's on the other hand. If you now also move forward, you will see that some offenses are classified based on objects. This means that some offenses can be committed against a person. Offenses can also be committed against property. Now, that's on the other hand. So also, if you move forward, you will realize that offenses can also be classified according to their sources. This means that offenses can be classified from where they are gotten from. For example, some offenses are gotten from the common law, while some offenses are gotten from statutory laws or authorities. So that is it for classification of offenses. Offenses are classified into different groups. So let's now then look at the first group, which is classification of offenses according to procedural process. Now, under classification of offenses according to procedural process, we have indictable offense and non-indictable offenses. So you see it, under classification of offenses according to procedural process, we have indictable offense and non-indictable offenses. So what is indictable offense? Indictable offense means any offense which on conviction may be punished by a term of imprisonment exceeding 2 years. So this then means that if an offender have been convicted for committing a particular offense, that offender is liable to imprisonment exceeding 2 years. So for indictable offense, it must be more than 2 years imprisonment. And also, for indictable offense, if the court is to impose a fine, it must be more than 400 naira. So it must be more than 2 years, and it must also be more than 400 naira. Then we move forward. Now, for indictable offenses also, you must note that the processes, because this is classification of offenses according to procedural purpose. So this is classification of offenses according to procedural purpose. So for indictable offense, you must know that the format, the way of instituting an action is by information. It is by information. That information is the process of instituting an action for indictable offenses. What of non-indictable offense? For non-indictable offense, the way of instituting for non-indictable offense, it is done by summary trial. Let's look at it. For non-indictable offense, these are offenses that do not fall under the meaning of an indictable offense. They are tried summarily without any charge sheet. It is done without any charge sheet. Summary trial does not require the rigorous process of filing charge and information sheet. So for indictable offense, you will see that it is by information. It is known. There is cross-examination, there is examination in chief, there is re-examination. But for non-indictable offense, which is lesser, you will see that it is done by summary trial. It is short, it is quick. Now, for the definition of non-indictable offenses, let's look at the case of Alame Yishiga versus Federal Republic of Nigeria. So let's look at the definition given by the court in this particular case. Now, in this particular case, the court defined summary trial as a non-jury proceedings that settles a controversy or disposes of a case in a relatively prompt and simple manner. So the court defines summary trial as a trial that is prompt and simple. So summary trial is the process of non-indictable offense. That is how non-indictable offenses are being tried. They are tried summarily. It is prompt, it is quick. However, for indictable offenses, it is long. It is very long. You have to go through cross-examination. It must be done by information. So you can see this is classification of offenses according to procedural for procedural purpose. That is, for indictable offense, it is tried by information, but for non-indictable offense, it is done by summary trial. It is short, it is quick, and it is simple. Now, this is just one classification of offenses. Then we move on to the next classification of offenses, which is classification of offenses according to their legal consequence. Classification of offenses according to their legal consequence. This you can find in section 3 of the criminal code. You can find this in section 3 of the criminal code, which provided for the division of offenses. On the first you have felony. Second, you have misdemeanor. Third, you have simple offenses. Also, we also have treason under this particular classification. So this is classification of offenses according to their legal consequences, according to the punishment. So that is what this classification dwells on. So we now first of all look at felony under this particular classification. Now it says here, this is an offense that is declared to be a felony or more serious offense than a misdemeanor, or is punishable without proof of previous conviction with death or with imprisonment of 3 years or more. So you see that for felony, which falls under classification of offenses according to their legal consequence, when an individual is convicted for felony, is liable to imprisonment exceeding 3 years. Felony 3 years, is liable to imprisonment exceeding 3 years. Now, that's it for felony. Also, the person can also be sentenced to death. Is liable to imprisonment exceeding 3 years. That's one. Is also liable to death penalty. And also for felony, there is no need for proof of previous conviction. However, if it was simple offenses, the judge can actually consider that Mr. A have never committed any offense before. Should we reduce the punishment on that ground? Should we let him go? Should we pardon him? But if an individual commits felony, that kind of question does not arise. It does not matter whether you have committed an offense in the past or not. So this is it for felony. So the legal consequence of committing felony is imprisonment exceeding 3 years, and also the offender is also liable to death penalty. That is the legal consequence of committing felony. Then we'll move on to misdemeanor under classification of offenses according to their legal consequence. Now, what's the legal consequence of committing misdemeanor? So it is an offense which is declared by law to be a misdemeanor, a minor wrongdoing, or is punishable by imprisonment for not less than 6 months but less than 3 years. Misdemeanor. So for misdemeanor, the offender is liable to imprisonment not less than 6 months. It must not be less than 6 months for misdemeanor. However, it's also liable to imprisonment less than, so 3 years is the maximum for misdemeanor. 3 years is the maximum, while the minimum is 6 months. 3 years is the maximum, the minimum is 6 months. For felony, the minimum is 3 years. There is no maximum. The minimum is 3 years, no maximum. For misdemeanor, the minimum is 6 months, while the maximum is 3 years. Because if it exceeds 3 years, then it is none other a misdemeanor but a felony. Now, let's move forward. To the next one, which is simple offenses. Simple offenses. Now, all offenses that are neither felony or misdemeanor are simple offenses. So, other offenses that are neither felony, that are neither misdemeanor, falls under simple offenses. What are the examples of simple offenses? They can be violating traffic lights. So that is simple offenses. So offenses that are neither felony and they are neither misdemeanor fall under simple offenses. Then we also have to look at treason according to classification of offenses according to their legal consequences. Now, let's look at treason. What is the legal consequence of committing treason? Now, this is an offense of betraying one's country, especially by threatening to kill or overthrow the sovereign government, and it is punishable by death, punishable only by death, and whosoever abets or attempts treason shall be punished with imprisonment for life for not any less term, or with a fine or both. So for treason, the legal consequence, because this is classification of offenses according to their legal consequence. So the legal consequence of committing treason is that the individual that committed treason is liable to a death penalty, is liable to be punished by death, and whosoever assists, whosoever also attempts to commit treason is punishable for life imprisonment, or with a fine or both. So the legal consequence of committing treason is that such individual that commits treason is liable to the death penalty, while the other person that abets or attempts to commit treason is liable to imprisonment for life or fine or both. Now, you must also note that if any person who is under the age of 18 years, if any person under the age of 18 years commits treason, what happens? Now, this is what it says. If any person under the age of 18 years is involved in treason, such person shall be detained at the pleasure of the president. Such person shall be detained at the pleasure of the president. This you can see in section 39, subsection 1 of the criminal code. Let's open to section 39. Section 39, subsection 1 of the criminal code. Now, look at what it says. Section 39, subsection 1. It says that where an individual who in the opinion of the court has not attained the age of 17 years at the time the offense was committed has been found guilty of an offense against either section 37 or section 38, such offender shall not be sentenced to death. Shall not be sentenced to death. So if the person is less than 18 years and he commits treason, that offender shall not be sentenced to death, but shall be detained, shall be ordered to be detained during the pleasure of the president. So that is it for treason. Now, this is classification of offenses according to the legal consequence. We have looked at the legal consequence of committing treason is either with the death penalty or with imprisonment exceeding 3 years. Then we also look at misdemeanor, which we said that the legal consequence of committing misdemeanor is that the offender is liable to imprisonment for not more than 3 years but less than 6 months. Then we also look at simple offenses, where we say that simple offenses are offenses that are neither felony or misdemeanor. And we also discuss treason. So this is classification of offenses according to their legal consequences, according to their punishments, according to the gravity. Now, we will now look at classification of offenses based on object. Classification based on object. Now, object in this sense does not only mean a marker. Object in this particular sense under criminal law is the person or the property in which the offense is committed against. So for classification of offenses according to based on objects, you will see that offenses can be committed against a person on one hand, while offenses can also be committed against property on the other hand. So offenses can be committed against a person and also against property. So for clarification, let's first of all look at offenses against person. Offenses against the person. Now, for offenses against person, you can see it in part 5 of the criminal code. Part 5 of the criminal code deals with offenses against persons. Part 6 of the criminal code deals with offenses against property. Now, let's look at offenses against person. Number 1 is assault. Assault. When I threaten you, I will slap people. Now, that's assault. So that offense, is it committed against property? No, it is committed against an individual. So offenses can be committed against an individual. Now, we also look at murder. Murder. Mr. A kills Mr. B. Now, that offense was committed against that individual. So offenses can be committed against individual. For murder, you can see that in section 216 of the criminal code. Now, manslaughter. Manslaughter, which is another example of a crime, is also committed against individual. It is also committed against person. So offenses can be committed against persons, and offenses can also be committed against property. Now, let's look at offenses that can be committed against properties. Now, number one is stealing. When Mr. A comes, steals this biro, in law it is said that that offense have been committed against the property. Now, you also look at burglary or house breaking. Burglary or house breaking, which is also against property. Mr. A sees a fancy house. In the night, he comes, he breaks into the house. Now, that's burglary. The offense was committed against the property, against the house. That's burglary. So offenses can be committed against a person, and offenses can also be committed against property. Also, look at arson. Arson. Mr. A sets fire on the property of another person. That's arson. That's arson. And in that particular sense, the offense was committed against property. So, in a nutshell, you have seen that offenses can be committed against a person, and the offenses can also be committed against property. So this is classification of offenses based on object. Now, let's look at classification of offenses according to their sources. Classification of offenses according to where they are gotten from. Now, let's look. So for classification of offenses according to their sources, we have the common law and statutory offenses. For example, under classification of offenses under the common law, we have conspiracy to corrupt public morals, which was created in the case of DPP versus Shaw. So it was created in the case of DPP versus Shaw. Conspiracy to corrupt public moral, and this falls under the common law because it is the source. It was where it was sourced from. It was where it was gotten. It was where it was bet. So that is it for the common law. These are crimes under the English criminal law of Commonwealth of Nations. These are offenses of the common law. They were developed by the common law during the court in those days. They were developed by the common law. That was the source. That was where they were gotten from, because this is classification of offenses according to their source. Now, under classification of offenses according to their source, we have statutory offenses. Now, as the name implies, are offenses created by statutes. So for statutory offenses, they are offenses that are created by statutes. They were given birth to by statutes. They were gotten from statutes. And an example of this is the criminal law, the criminal code. We also have the penal code. We also have the EFCC Act. We also have the Violence Against Persons Act. So those offenses under those statutes were gotten from those particular statutes. So this is classification of offenses according to their source. They were sourced from statutes. They were gotten from statutes. So this is it for classification of offenses. So for this particular topic, you must have been able to understand that certain offenses are classified according to their legal consequences. Where we spoke on felony, we spoke on the legal consequence of committing felony, the legal consequence of committing misdemeanor, the legal consequence of committing treason, the legal consequence of committing simple offenses. That is classification of offenses according to their legal consequence. We also spoke on classification of offenses according based on their procedural purpose. That is the processes, the procedure for instituting an action according to these offenses. So we spoke on indictable offenses, which is tried by information. It is by information. However, for non-indictable offenses, it is done by summary trial. It is short, it is quick, it is prompt. For indictable offenses, it is long, it is ridiculous. In fact, There is cross-examination, there is re-examination. It is very known. But for non-indictable offenses, it is quick and simple. It is summary trial. It is very short. So that was classification of offenses according to their for procedural purpose. So we also spoke on classification of offenses according to their source, which we just rounded up recently, according to their source, where we spoke on the common law and also statutory offenses. That was classification of offenses according to their source, classification of offenses according to where they are gotten from. Then we also spoke on classification of offenses based on object, where we said that an offense can be committed against a person. Also, an offense can be committed against a property. So this is it for classification of offenses. Thank you so much for watching. By name, I am Japhet Okaka Ebosetali. Thank you.